Your Thanksgiving table.
Yeah, I'm going to have one. I have to bring it though, but because here's a picture of one.
Turducken.
Yeah,
picture. That is it.
And you see, you cut it like right down here. See, and then this is what it looks like inside. See, so you got turkey, then duck, and then dressing, and then chicken. And then you just have to do it that way.
T-minus 30 seconds.
DeAndre Hopkins! Justin Jefferson, have a day! What a catch! CeeDee Lamb! Only this guy, I think. I mean, maybe I'm trying to think of somebody else.
And he hurdles his way into the end zone. Touchdown.
Irish snared for the interception by Kenny Moore.
2, 1, 0.
What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome into the Final Drive Week 17 edition, the penultimate edition of the Final Drive in our my first season here. Appreciate you tuning in. As always, we got a big time show today, as always, as it has been in the past few weeks or so, just leading up to the playoffs here. A lot to break down. New guests coming in here. But a familiar guest co-host here. So let me bring in my guy. We're going to get after it here. Let me bring in my guy, Mr. Bryce Hunt. Bryce, sir, thank you very much for joining me once again, man. Missed you on the program here. And how are you? How are how you feeling about your Baltimore Ravens, man?
Yeah, well, it was kind of the writing was on the wall, I think, the past 4 weeks or so, but it's good to be back for the third time this year. Ravens have gone 1-2 since I've done the show. Some pretty tough losses. This was just another 1 point loss for the Ravens. You know, it's always a close game, but you like to be on the positive side, and you know, you're just happy to be in these games when Lamar Jackson's out. And that's about all I can be hopeful for at this point in the season. So.
Yeah, man, it's tough sliding for the Ravens. I mean, these injuries have definitely caught up to you guys. Everybody's dealing with injuries, but I mean, when you guys are down your quarterback, that's always tough. Really exciting noon slate though today. The playoff picture was very fluid, as it has been throughout the past couple of weeks, and we're gonna talk about the playoff picture right away here. But like I said, really exciting noon slate. Like, I mean, it was like that last week too. Just so many games coming down to the wire. This is so much fun right now. What I did want to ask you really quickly though was about Tyler Huntley. Just on the Baltimore Ravens note, I have a couple teams written down here. Like, the one bright side for the Ravens, I feel like, is that Tyler Huntley has kind of created this market for himself in a sense. Like, we've kind of seen how important the backup quarterback position is really starting to become in everybody's eyes, right? I mean, Mitchell Trubisky got picked up by the Buffalo Bills. I've talked about that in the past. I've talked about how much I love, even the Saints having Taysom Hill and Jameis Winston there as well. There's a couple of other teams around the league as well. But Tyler Huntley, what have your thoughts been on him? Like, do you think that he has created a market for himself? Do you think that, like, I have a couple of teams written down here in terms of maybe teams that he could go to maybe be like a holdover or something like that if they draft a quarterback this upcoming year? What are your thoughts on Tyler Huntley and the market that he might have created for himself?
Well, as someone who's had to watch him the past 4 weeks, I think that he's definitely improved whatever stock that he had. I think that the situation is very important, right? It was what the Ravens really wanted to do is be able to bring in a backup quarterback who they weren't gonna need to change the system. They could still run the same offense through a guy like Huntley, and really just pick up where Lamar left off, which is what happened, right? He doesn't have the X factor that Lamar has that can steal you a game, but if you go through the Ravens' past 4 games, they went 0-4, but really like a 1 point loss to Green Bay that, you kick an extra point and, we're going overtime, and a 1 point loss against the Rams. Like, those are 2 good teams. A 2 point loss in a game that he came in against Cleveland that, they made a big second half comeback. Obviously, Cincinnati, they got smoked, but he still put up 3 touchdowns on the team that won the AFC North. So I think that from the Ravens' perspective, he kept them in every single game, and for him, that has to look great on his resume. Obviously, he can't play defense for a team that's dealt with a lot of injuries on that side of the ball, but they were in every single game when I think a lot of people counted them out for sure. So I think he could find a home somewhere else, and this is going to help his stock. We've kind of seen with maybe similar to a guy like Teddy Bridgewater, maybe he gets a shot somewhere and is able to prove himself like he did. So I don't know. I think he could improve somewhere. I don't know if it'll be in Baltimore and if he's earned a shot as a little bit more than what he's getting in Baltimore. But I think this was a great fit for him, and it'll help his stock for sure.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Bryce. And like the thing is too, is I think that Baltimore, in my opinion, is his most likely destination next year. Him being a free agent, he can go wherever he wants. But I think that he's at least commanded, kind of to your point there, he's commanded a little bit more money at the very least. And maybe he does go to one of these teams like Carolina was looking for a quarterback. Maybe they're probably going to draft a quarterback this year. Maybe they don't, but maybe they want to shake up. I think the other thing is too, is that like you said, you talked about Tyler Huntley kind of being able to come in for Lamar Jackson there and be kind of a similar quarterback in that sense, but he's also shown that he can shoulder a load with his arm. So he can kind of be a little bit fluid with whatever scheme that he's in. He's not, just confined. He's not pigeonholed to one scheme, which I think is really important for him. So maybe a Carolina, maybe a Pittsburgh, a Washington football team, maybe even a Seattle if Russell Wilson is gone. Who knows? We're going to get into that with Matty Brown very shortly here. But that's good. That's good we had that conversation. Let's take a really quick look at the playoff picture. Now, this is not completely updated. This is right before Sunday Night Football kicked off. But so we have the Green Bay Packers who have locked up the number 1 seed in the NFC. The Philadelphia Eagles, I believe, have jumped into the 6th overall seed now. But just looking at this, Bryce, just maybe one question for you. Which matchup, as if it stands right now like this, let's just say, which matchup kind of intrigues you the most out of these two playoff pitchers?
The first round matchups don't really catch my eye, but it's the second round matchups that would potentially be really interesting. We heard it on the Sunday night broadcast, the possibility of Mike McCarthy going into Lambeau, eventually Tom Brady going into Lambeau. The idea and the thought of, the fact that nobody really is that head and shoulders above, and there's going to be a lot of tough games that need to be played, and that number 1 seed really holds so much value, especially this year. I would love a Cowboys Packers matchup. I know you would as well. But I think that would be, that would probably be one of the most watched games all year, definitely in the playoffs beside the Super Bowl. But that would be electric for me.
Yeah, they got some history there, man. Going back, they mentioned on the broadcast going back to '67 there with the Ice Bowl and whatnot. And then even in the present day, right? Obviously, Mike McCarthy, he has the history with the Green Bay Packers, won a Super Bowl as a head coach there. But not only that, but him and just the Dallas Cowboys versus the Green Bay Packers in recent memory in the playoffs, like they've had some really good playoff matchups. So even without Mike McCarthy coaching there, so there'd be so many storylines going in that game. But I think that for me personally, just looking at this really quickly, I would really be curious. Like the Bengals are really, I mentioned on last week's show, like just how much the Bengals are intriguing me. I'm not sure. I've been kind of high on them for a couple of weeks now. Just, am I kind of crazy? Am I buying into this hype a little bit too much? Today, as we will talk about right away, today was a massive statement for the Bengals. And the only thing that kind of concerns me right now with the Bengals, I mean, Joe Burrow is finding a way to manage this poor offensive line right now. I'm not sure how long that he can sustain that. He's done a pretty good job so far. He's crept into this dark horse MVP conversation somehow, although I think it'll remain a dark horse. I don't think that he's actually in legitimate conversation there, but yeah, it's really interesting with this Bengals team. I can't help but wonder if inexperience will catch up to them at some point or another. See what they're going to do in the first round there. But the Bengals versus whoever they're playing, I think has to be near the top of the list. That's a super fun offense to watch overall. But let's get into recapping these games. We got about 6 minutes or so before we're going to bring in Matty. So let's quickly run through this Sunday night football game. You were talking about it with me right before we got on here. For the casual fan, unless you're a Packers fan, a cheesehead like myself, there wasn't a whole ton for you to look at if you are just a casual fan in this one. But realistically, I mean, yes, the Packers, they clinched number 1 seed, but how did they get there? I mean, the game plan is very often when it comes to facing a backup quarterback is get the quarterback in some must-pass situations, which the Packers did exactly, right? They contained Dalvin Cook. He obviously went down with an injury there near the end of the game, but they contained the running game. They forced Minnesota into long third downs all game long. And Sean Mannion, I mean, you almost to a certain extent, as a Packers fan, I didn't really feel bad for him, but to a certain extent, you got to feel a little bit sorry for Sean Mannion because he just really wasn't put in a great position all night. What were your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I kind of felt like Sean Mannion maybe got into the Kirk Cousins primetime game spirit a little bit with that performance. But it's a tough place to go in and make a spot start for a team in this league. It's I don't know. I was telling you, as a casual fan, once the over was hit, early in the fourth quarter, there was about a lot of minutes in that game that were pretty meaningless to me. You saw how dominant, really, and we'll get to this in the Cincy game as well, but just how valuable it is to have a top 5 quarterback paired with a top 5 receiver, and how big of a difference in a game that can do for you. Like the Rodgers to Adams connection was
silly
bread and butter, and you knew it was coming, and it's still going to get shoved down your throat. There's nothing you can do about it. So
yeah,
Lambeau's a tough place to play once the snow starts falling, and Minnesota, I think the writing was on the wall for this one all the way through.
Yeah, now all of the conversation is going to carry over into the offseason here and even into the final week here, week 18. Is Mike Zimmer's job up for grabs? We've talked at length about this on this show, just where Mike Zimmer stands right now. Kirk Cousins, his future. Obviously, he's going to be making a fistful of money next season. Where does he end up? The future in Minnesota is going to be one of those organizations, one of those franchises to watch this year in terms of just how much movement is going to happen. There's going to be a lot of things to keep an eye on there. But you mentioned Davante Adams and Aaron Rodgers connection, man. Like, I've had the pleasure of watching Aaron Rodgers to Jordy Nelson's connection. That was something special. But this is just Davante Adams is Jordy Nelson. No disrespect to Jordy Nelson, but he wishes he had Davante Adams' skill set. You know what I mean? Davante Adams is a ridiculous receiver. And so just to watch him and Aaron Rodgers both kind of playing at the top of their level right now is just absolutely so special to watch. There's some throws like they make me shake my head at least a few times a game where I just go like, what are you to do if you are on the defensive side of the ball? Like it's just some things that keep defensive coordinators up at night. But yeah, not much to talk about overall in that Sunday night football game. We could go deeper, but before we bring in Matty here, I did want to get to this Kansas City Chiefs and the Cincinnati Bengals game because this was the headliner. This was the game of the day. This was the game of the day leading up into it all week long. There was conversation of Joe Burrow is better than Patrick Mahomes. There's conversation of the Bengals are unstoppable. Like it was insane. And so the Bengals clinched the AFC North with an absolute statement game here. First time since 2015. Like I mentioned, Joe Burrow has played his way into the MVP convo a little bit there, dark horse candidate, but Jamar Chase is probably now got to be the odds-on favorite for Offensive Player of the Year with 11 grabs, 266, and 3 tugs for him. How did you feel about this game, man? This was a game actually where I actually one thing I do want to add. Orlando Brown Jr., the left tackle for the Kansas City Chiefs, who you are very familiar with as a Baltimore Ravens fan, he actually had an ankle injury pre-game, and then not only that, but Lucas Niang, who they slotted in for him right after that to start the game in his place. The second-year pro, he actually got hurt in this game as well. So they actually had to slide Joe Thuney over who was actually an interior offensive lineman by nature. They had to slide him over to left tackle at one point to fill that hole. So that was kind of Trey Hendrickson, very talented pass rusher, created havoc and got a lot of pressures on Patrick Mahomes today. But what did you see in this game? What was your brief analysis of this one?
About what you expected, right? It was a gun show through and through. Awful day to be a defensive coordinator. Like 900 or something total yards combined. Just an absolute air show. As that's what these two teams do, right? They They air it out. They make big plays. They find their top guys and they get a lot of yards after the catch. And that's exactly what we saw. A couple special plays from Jamar Chase. As you mentioned, I've seen probably too much of that in the 2 games he's played against the Ravens with north of 300 yards already in his career. It's going to be a long one for me. But the one thing that stood out to me is just thinking about these 2 teams in the playoff scenario. And this is something I know we got to be quick with this, but it's something I wanted to talk to you about, which is the fact that when you look at the statistics, and outside of the run defense, I'm talking strictly the pass defense, because that's how a lot of these AFC teams are built, really, aside from the teams in the AFC South. It's a very pass heavy, and it's a very poor defensive statistics, really, with just the Bills and the Patriots being some standouts. And we're seeing that, with the AFC playoff picture, the way it is right now, Kansas City has lost 5 games this year. 4 of those losses have been against teams that are currently in the AFC playoff picture. And, we talk about the knockout punch. You have to be playing your best offensive game. They're 1-4 against teams in the AFC playoff picture. Do you think that lack of defense could be a problem for these teams, like the 2 we watched specifically today? Yeah, it's so entertaining to watch, but does that kind of give the upper hand to a team like the Patriots or the Bills, who have guys and systems that can stop that? Because it was great to see, but there's a bigger problem here, in my opinion, with those 2 teams.
I think that's really interesting. You actually bring that up, man. I mean, that kind of goes back to the old adage, defense wins championships, right? But when it comes down to it, your defense is going to have to make a play. The thing with now that I think has kind of changed over time as well, as we've kind of seen it now, is where these defenses are okay giving up yards and whatnot, right? It's just a matter of, comes down to third downs. It comes down to the red zone defense. That's most important. Are you going to stop them from getting 6 points, or are you gonna only allow 3 or 6 points, right? At the end of the day. So I think there's something to be said for what you just brought up there. I think it's going to be interesting I don't know if I have a straight up answer for you right now, but I think that it kind of bleeds into what I did want to bring up with Steve Spagnuolo and how aggressive he was today against the Bengals. The biggest play of the game today came on a 3rd and 27 as the clock was kind of bleeding down there, and Charvarius Ward had one-on-one coverage against Jamar Chase, as he did for most of this game. And they just kind of heaved it up to Jamar Chase, and it was like taking candy from a baby on that. Steve Spagnuolo, along with, kind of reminds me of Wink Martindale, who you're very familiar with over there in Baltimore. Greg Williams is another one. These guys just perpetually aggressive, leaving their guys one-on-one on the islands and bringing a lot of pressure. So it kind of cost the Chiefs. He put the Chiefs in the bad spot today. But I think that's something to keep an eye on as we go forward here. It's just at the end of the day, I think it just comes down to your defense got to make a play when your defense needs to make a play. We've seen some great offense get stumped in the playoffs, and because of these defenses just coming up at the right time. And like you said, kind of just goes back to the defense win championships kind of thing. But let's bring in Matty, man. We got some questions for Matty. So without further ado, let's bring in from SI.com, Seahawks Maven of SI.com, Mr. Matty Brown. Matty, sir, thank you very much for joining us on the show tonight, man. Hope you are well. How are you doing? How was week 17 for you? How'd you enjoy the game, man? Talk to us.
I'm very good, thank you. It's almost 5 a.m. in the UK, but I've had a nice my 5th coffee of the evening, so I'm slowly getting through the shakes. Week 17 was a bit more nice because the Detroit Lions came to Seattle, and Seattle, they sort of threatened to do their mini collapse thing, and then they managed to avoid that, so that was good. I was enjoying your conversation about defense actually mattering, because I imagine all of your questions to me are going to be about, is Russell Wilson going to be traded? Is Pete Carroll going to be fired? Because obviously Seattle's not playoff relevant. But yeah, I am a defensive guy predominantly, although I just write about the Seahawks. But it's nice to hear you sort of admitting that while defense doesn't matter, it does eventually matter at a certain point. And it's interesting, both the Chiefs and the Bengals, their defenses were getting praised for sort of being a bit better and improving. And hang on, they're not as bad as we thought. And then it comes into a shootout where they both meet each other. And then, I mean, it must be so hard for those defense coordinators because, why didn't they double chase or whatever? But also when they're in the shootout, it's like, well, we just need one stop, and then that just sort of every time that seems to happen, especially those kinds of teams where most of their resources are allocated to the offense, and tough situation, made for a fun game.
Yeah, you almost want to. It's one of those things. I think I saw a tweet today saying, like, can we just get a Joe Burrow versus Patrick Mahomes matchup for like the next decade? Once a year for the next decade at least. Like that'd be unreal. This is one of those. This is one of those matchups where maybe it's some foreshadowing. To what's to come for the playoffs this year. Like you mentioned, the defenses, we'll see after they had a chance to maybe play each other once. We'll see if they get another round 2 against each other. See what kind of changes get made there. See if Steve Spagnuolo is as aggressive. I got to ask you, Matty, though, this kind of is a little bit of a curveball, though. I did not realize you are in the UK, man. Are you typically like up all night on Sundays? Like what's your schedule like on a Sunday?
I don't look like one of those nocturnal animals with like massive eyes and no, my schedule's kind of messed up. Thank you for asking. It's borderline nocturnal, borderline degenerate. I'm planning to go to bed and then wake up at sort of midday-ish, so like 1, and then with the Seahawks not being as relevant, I don't sort of need to stay up so long. I can get back to UK time. My girlfriend doesn't lose sanity with me, so that's always good. It's a balancing act, and then obviously the draft comes around, and then the body clock gets disintegrated again. So, but I love football, so.
Love to hear that, man. Well, we do have questions for you, and you did kind of do a little bit of foreshadowing as to what we wanted to ask you there. But for starters, I do want to ask you about this game a little bit. Obviously, like you mentioned, not really any playoff implications on this one. One thing I do want to say, just from the Detroit Lions point of view, if you were a fantasy player and you got the opportunity to pick up Amon-Ra St. Brown over the past month or so, last 5 games, 43 grabs, 451 yards, and 4 tugs last 5 games. So Amon-Ra St. Brown has kind of been one of those special surprises that you weren't really expecting maybe to produce this season, but maybe in the coming seasons, he's been one of those special guys. But going back to the Seahawks and your bread and butter, Matty, Rashad Penny, monster day, 25 rushes, $170, 2 tugs on the ground. This is the Seattle Seahawks, just their 7th time scoring more than 25 points. So their offense has kind of been hit or miss, it seems like, with the Seattle Seahawks offense. What was your thoughts on this game overall? Give us your brief analysis on this one. I know they were playing the Detroit Lions, but what were your kind of biggest takeaways from this one?
So big takeaways. It was nice to see the offense finally sort of put together a complete performance. I think the last time they actually all executed was week 1 against the Colts, and they did well that game as well. They did have a mini lull period in that game, but this game sort of helped by timely turnovers as well by the defense. They actually went out there, executed, put together all 4 quarters, because the issues this season have largely just been execution based. Like, you can criticize play calling, but realistically, they just couldn't. Like, there was just, if one person's not doing their job, it just really did show how it plummets everything, and that happened through like 1 quarter, through like 1 half, or through a whole game, so that was really nice from the offense. And then the defense, it was a bit disappointing because they had been performing well in total points, and which isn't the best metric, but I felt it was more likely to be able to be sustained next year, because to me, the issue on the defense wasn't really, it was fixable. It was just the pass rush. Like, the stuff they were giving up was check down stuff, which was more an issue with not having a pass rush to force the ball out, not to remove the check down, to allow the zone coverage defenders to move up quicker. There wasn't a reliable pass rush. So to me, the defense this game, though, they allowed 7 explosive plays. The Lions obviously put up above their point scoring average. And St. Brown, that guy you talked about, like Seattle, they've been running a lot more sort of 2-over-1 coverages, like middle field open stuff, to sort of help their guys out, not put them on islands. They're not as cover 3 as they used to be. And obviously, think about the Legion of Boom and stuff. So they have taken measures in that sense. But St. Brown, when it was the 1-on-1, he cooked it. And even from a fantasy perspective, they put him in the backfield, and on that 3rd and 10, he carried a draw play for the touchdown, and they're sort of using him in the backfield as well. So that's an interesting thing. But from a Seattle perspective, bit disappointing with the defense, but more encouraging from the offense, but really didn't learn much from the game. the big thing, like the overarching thing, and I'm sure you asked me about with Pete Carroll, but they're still fighting for him. That, you know, the locker room's playing music after the game. They're all hyped after the win. Culturally, it still seems like it's together. Apart from perhaps, you know, the quarterback maybe feeling a bit uncomfortable with the situation. I don't know.
Yeah, that's big. Yeah, if you're still fighting for a coach, sounds like you said it. If it sounds like he hasn't lost the team, then that's step one in retaining your job for 2022.
Yeah, that helps.
Bryce, go ahead.
Yeah, Matty, you mentioned the uncertainty at the quarterback position and with Pete Carroll. It's a tough division, especially when you look at the next 2 to 3 years. My question actually isn't about whether Russ is going to be back, whether Pete's going to be back, but we see quite often in this league, and maybe today is as good of a day as any to talk about how wide receivers can kind of be divas at times. But watching the Seahawks game, like some of the body language you're seeing from DK Metcalf. Now, granted, he had a great game, but do you think that this is a guy that the Seahawks could maybe look to flip for, you know, some of those assets that they need going forward? Because what is he going to be for the next 2 to 3 years in a division where they're going to have their backs against the wall and they don't even know if they're going to have, you know, they don't know who's even going to be throwing them the ball. So do you think that they could look to move him if, you know, the front office isn't maybe agreeing with him and if they're not on the same page in some of that regard?
Well, obviously they are short of assets as well, aren't they? Because Jamal Adams, that trade, they don't have a first-round pick this year. They gave up quite a lot for Jamal Adams. I actually think Adams has been a lot better than a lot of people credit him for. But regardless, they overpaid for him because they couldn't really draft safeties. So flipping Metcalf is something that has been theorized by fans of the team as well. You're not alone in that, Bryce. And I don't like the idea because he's such a young player and obviously such a raw talent. I did notice the sort of body language issues. Now, part of that might be because Geno Smith was targeting him in ways that Russell hadn't really trusted him with, like, and just Russell hasn't thrown. But then, you know, today Russell throws that nice jump ball to him one-on-one and Metcalf hauls it in. And then you hear Metcalf after the game talk about the foot injury he's been dealing with since I think week 4. And, you know, why wouldn't you be frustrated if you don't have the same sort of lateral agility and explosion that you usually have? So we don't really know what's going on there. But the body language has been poor. And that's not just I was saying last week how he looked just completely unhappy. And, you know, there's a screen thrown low to him and he's like scraping out the ground. And it's like, yeah, that is probably quite annoying. So trading him, that's an interesting question because he's the kind of player that Russell Wilson, I think, elevates. Despite all of what I've just said, Russell mainly targets guys near the numbers. And I mean, it's quite lazy to compare like this, but his skill set to me is almost like Mike Evans. It's not a take unique to mine. I've seen that around, but he's kind of that sideline ISO ball kind of receiver who runs those kind of routes, but he's not like a pure number one. But then he's sort of got a number one body. You know, you could put him in you can put him in the slot a bit as well, but his route tree is never going to be like, you know, you were talking about Devontae Adams earlier. Like, it's fine. He doesn't have to be Devontae Adams, but he's not going to be able to do everything. But his routes kind of match up nicely with what Russell likes to target generally. And I think just a bit more trust on sort of over the middle, like backside dig stuff, where Metcalf has sort of been open with like a trust throw, but Russ hasn't thrown it for whatever reason. And he might still be dealing with, I think he is still dealing with his finger and how that's affecting his accuracy. But so trading Metcalf, if Russell's not there, then why would you do it? Because you've surely got enough assets because you've traded Russell. Or then are you then embracing a complete rebuild? Well, that doesn't really make sense though, because the rest of the roster is kind of already like they've pushed quite a lot into it. And then, you know, if you're not trading Russell, then why would you trade Metcalf? Because then it's just Lockett and you don't have. I mean, there are quite a lot of good receivers coming out. So maybe that is an option. If you don't trade Russell, then maybe you move Metcalf. But then is that going to upset Russell Wilson? So a lot of factors at play, but definitely like a possibility. But I mean, Pete Carroll loves DK Metcalf. I can't see, unless Pete Carroll's not there. So lots of moving parts. But I don't think it will happen ultimately. But it's definitely like it's the one piece they have where it's like, how do you get a? I mean, I don't think personally, I don't know. This is why I'm not a general manager, but I don't think personally I'd give a first round pick for DK Metcalf. However, what did I mean, DeAndre Hopkins isn't the best example because he went for absolutely nothing. But what do you think DK Metcalf would warrant in a trade? I think some team would give a first round pick for him, right? Maybe he was a second round pick anyway.
I mean, because he's so young, like you mentioned, I mean, and such a raw talent. I mean, yeah, I could see it. Like, I mean, I'm not sure I would agree with it, but I could see it happening. Definitely. I could definitely see it happening. Matty, my question, Bryce wasn't going to ask you about the coach and the quarterback, but I am.
That's very kind of him. Oh,
I'm going to ask you the typical question, but I'm going to try and ask it in a different way here. Do you think that I was talking about on last week's show, I was talking about the potential of Pete Carroll's, does his future rely on Russell Wilson being there or not? And the reason why I asked that is because if Russell Wilson is not there, do you think the Seahawks look to, okay, we just traded our franchise quarterback. Yeah, we're going to get a slew of picks in return. Do we just, I mean, even if Pete Carroll still has a locker room, do we look elsewhere? Do we look for one of these younger offensive coaches? And do we look at, okay, we can just go bring in maybe, whether it's this, I know it's not the sexiest draft this year, but do we look at it, quarterback this year to bring in? Do we look at it, wait for a quarterback in 2023 to bring in? But do we just kind of do this complete overhaul, like you kind of mentioned, a total rebuild kind of thing? We have our receivers in DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett there. We have some weapons there to surround a young quarterback with. But based on my question, do you think that Pete Carroll's future depends on Russell Wilson being there?
Well, I wouldn't think so, because really it's almost there's an argument that without Russell, Pete Carroll would be in his element, because he wouldn't have to justify running the ball a lot. He wouldn't have to justify focusing more on the defense, and they'd play hard physical football. And you think about like Tavares Jackson in the early years of Pete in Seattle and all of that stuff. They'd try and run the football a lot and play good defense, and they'd probably finish like 7-9 or 7-10 now, and be sort of a scrappy wild card fringe team. And I think Pete would love that in a sense, and really with his experience of the Seahawks organization, he'd be that kind of good sort of figure for young players coming into the league as they try to develop something. But really, what you said about, I just want to touch on what you said about the quarterback situation. Well, if they wanted to move on from Russell, they should have done it last year. They then, because look at the quarterback draft, right? Which is, still to be confirmed, but it's much better than this year's crop, it seems on the surface. I haven't watched any of them, but as going off what the draft Knicks say, and they're never wrong. So then if you look at, fast forward to this year, they went 12-4. They won the NFC West. Russell Wilson got injured. They've struggled across the board. I thought they had a better roster heading into it, which shows how much I know or how variable the NFL is. And I just, the quarterback draft's not that good. Free agent quarterbacks, I mean, it's rare that a good quarterback hits free agency, but there's not going to be that many opportunities around the league, I don't think, unless, I mean, Deshaun Watson's like the weird wild card, like, ooh, I mean, that would be like, currently with what we know, that would make me very uncomfortable. So it's a really bad situation to want to move on from Russell Wilson now. I really don't understand that. And then, yeah, but just to reiterate, moving on from Russ, I don't think Pete Carroll needs Russell, because, there is obviously the quarterback's important to taking that extra step, but I still think Seattle would be a scrappy, like, fun team, just based on the cultural stuff that I already mentioned, and the clear physical effort, the battling. He has evolved his defensive scheme. Like, there is like enough there to leave him in charge.
That's interesting. That's actually really interesting because I mean it seems like that's a viable possibility, right? That Russell is no longer in a Seahawks uniform, and who knows? I mean, depending on where they trade him, I mean, who knows what the return is? I mean, it's not going to be Russell Wilson in return, but we'll see if maybe there's another quarterback involved in that trade if that does transpire. Matty, one last question for you before we get you out of here. I just wanted to know who is the Seahawks are a team that I personally haven't really delved into too much this season. I'll be honest. I've watched a lot of teams this season and I've watched a lot of teams closely, but the Seattle Seahawks just seem to kind of fly under the radar for me this season. It happens with a few teams with me every year, but who's kind of been your biggest disappointment on the year, and who's kind of been your biggest standout for you? Just one from each side as a Seahawks fan.
So a standout would be Al Woods, who is a 35-year-old defensive lineman. He's a run stuffer. He was in Seattle in COVID makes me lose track of years, but he took a year out in the COVID year. Then 2019 he was in Jacksonville. So I guess 2018 he was in Seattle. Maybe it was a year after. But anyway, he was really good in Seattle. His first stint there as a nose tackle predominantly. Went to Jacksonville. I don't really know what happened. I mean, that's Jacksonville, right? Sort of just, I didn't hear much about him. But then he is a run-stuffing defensive lineman. You've probably never heard of him, so that's kind of how it works. And then took a year out because of COVID. He's come back and he's playing. I don't know if you remember Red Bryant, who was this sort of like big end guy in the Legion of Boom years. Well, he's played that kind of role. He's also played nose tackle with, and he's also played 3 technique with Jaron Reed being cut in the offseason over some weird contract dispute. Now, he doesn't offer much as a pass rusher, but as a run defender, he's been absolutely dominant. And in Seattle, that's very important. It's kept Bobby Wagner clean. It's kept Jordan Brooks clean. Both of them are very high in tackle numbers. And, Woods is a blend of power, experience. He has 36-inch long arms. Which is crazy. He's just been an absolute man mountain of a player and a galvanizing force in the locker room as well. That's what Pete Carroll's said. That's what other defensive coaches have said. That's what players have said. So a bit of an odd one there, but I'll give him some credit. And then biggest disappointment.
Everybody else. No, I'm just kidding.
No, there's been a lot of bright spots. I like to focus on the positive, but I'd say Russell Wilson has been a disappointment, and it's an easy thing to talk about and a relevant thing to talk about. I mean, if you look at 2020, they sort of started red hot and then they sort of collapsed, and he struggled against certain defensive looks. Now, the offense tried to adjust, but it didn't adjust very well, and they couldn't run the ball effectively enough when they needed to. Similar to the sort of narrative around the Kansas City Chiefs in 2021 about like, they're playing too high. What do they do? Now, that's continued into this season, and it's more just been Russell being off, and then when he's faced with these similar coverages, he won't or can't throw certain windows required to stress these coverages, like the intermediate areas of the field. Not really necessarily through height, but more sort of an anticipation of threading it past his own defender. It sort of has to be a primary and has to be open. So I don't know. Biggest disappointment's harsh, and he obviously got injured, and that has affected his accuracy and I think his confidence as well. But that to me was a disappointment because I was like, they've got they traded for Gabe Jackson on the offensive line. The offensive line's been average at pass protection and good in the run game. ESPN's pass block win rate metric backs that up. And then they've got Gerald Everett, decent tight end option. They've got DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. They did have Chris Carson before he got injured. The whole offense has just been really poor execution wise. So to put it all on Wilson isn't fair. And I'm not doing that, but he has disappointed me in the sense that I really thought this was going to be like, maybe not win the division because as Bryce said, it's absolutely brutal, but at least like get to the playoffs and maybe put something together with the defense, sort of having a bit more togetherness and sort of figuring a few things out. So probably not the best, not the biggest disappointment, but a disappointment.
But definitely a disappointment. Yeah, no, that's definitely fair enough, Matty. Matty, we'll let you go in just a second, but I do this with every single guest. Give me a Super Bowl prediction, and then we'll let you get to bed.
Okay, so I'll predict what I want to happen, which is I would like the Bengals well, I like
That's a first.
two AFC teams. I like the Titans and I like the Bengals. But anyway, because they're not evil, so I'll have the Bengals though, and then I'll have them facing the Packers because I'm a fan of defense. I like what the Packers doing defensively in a way. I mean, it's quite funny seeing them play too high, and then like it was Kenny Clark, wasn't it? That Collinsworth on the broadcast tonight, he was like, "Look, they're in too high and they can't run it." And Mike Zimmer's probably like absolutely like tearing his hair out.
Just
I would be.
losing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean that's interesting. And then I'd like the Bengals to absolutely destroy the Packers and like blow them out, shut them out because the Packers are also evil. So let's have the Bengals win a Super Bowl. But like I said, that's what I would like to happen.
Okay, man, that was. I'll be honest with you. I have not heard Bengals. I've had quite a few guests on here so far this season. I have not heard Bengals come out of anybody's mouth. So props to you, man. Kudos to you for putting those guys in the Super Bowl there, Matty. Thank you very much for your time, man. You've been super generous. Hopefully, we can have you on the show once again next season. But get some rest, man, and enjoy the rest of the NFL season. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks very much for having me. Really enjoyed it, and enjoy the playoffs.
Thanks, man. Take care. Have a good night.
See you. Bye.
Good guy, man. Jeez, I did not know that Matty was joining us from the UK. that is some dedication to helping people out, man. That's those are the people you love to see early on in the career here.
You want to talk about the late window? Yeah, that's that's dedication to be up that late. I can only imagine when the Seahawks have a primetime game, what that's.
Oh my god.
Jeez.
Oh my god.
That's incredible.
Man. Let's we got two things to get to here, Bryce. One being the Dallas Cowboys versus Arizona Cardinals. We didn't go as deep into that Bengals game as I wanted to. But whatever, that's okay. I think we got the most of it out there. Bengals are obviously looking pretty legit as it stands right now. We'll see if they can string together a playoff win, but props to them for winning the AFC North. But let's get to this Dallas and Arizona game super quick. This was the under the radar kind of mass of the game of the day. I tweeted this out that like the Dallas Cowboys have only beaten 3 playoff teams only played 3 playoff teams in their schedule so far this season. So they've got to be like near the bottom of the league in terms of strength of schedule as far as that goes. Then they go and play their 4th playoff team today in the Arizona Cardinals with all of this hype building up around the Dallas Cowboys. And for a lot of this game until probably the 4th quarter, for 3 quarters of this game, it was not very good on really both sides of the ball, especially the offensive side of the ball. The Arizona Cardinals 3-game skid entering this game. They needed a statement game. They needed a bounce back game, a big time win before they get into the playoffs. What did you kind of see in this game? Because the Arizona Cardinals came out here, they made a statement. Dallas Cowboys, how you feeling about the Cowboys? You got any reservations towards them now after taking this L?
I do. This game hurt a lot for me because the Cowboys were a team that I was growing a lot of confidence in, and really vice versa with the Cardinals. Cardinals were really slipping for me, especially with how poorly they've played at home this year. I was really, really enjoying the brand of football that the Cowboys were playing, and they came out. And I think the final number was like 45 rush yards, and Dak didn't steal them a game. And the Cardinals are a team that have kind of been searching for their identity, and they've been treading water in the demon division that Matty just talked about. This was not the outcome I was expecting. I stayed away from it personally on the betting side of the ball, but this was a game that I think the Cowboys really had a chance to make a big statement, and they fell flat on their face. And now you're kind of back to what do I think about this, right? Like, what do I think about the Cowboys? Are they benefiting from a weaker division and a weaker schedule? Are the Cowboys legitimate? Can the Cowboys really put up some numbers? And it seemed like they were, converting every time they needed to, and they were making big plays. And we saw a big game from Christian Kirk, who's, when they're healthy, he's, not even their top receiver, and he was playing like it today. And it put me in a pretzel, and I don't appreciate that. But I don't know. Like Isaiah Simmons played great on the defensive side of the ball. I don't know whether this was a great day for the Cardinals or a bad day for the Cowboys. I don't know if the Cowboys are frauds. It really put
Mhm.
me in a pretzel, and I don't know where to go from here. I still want to believe in this Dallas Cowboys team,
Mhm.
but they're making it hard right now for me.
Yeah, the biggest thing for me when it comes to the Cowboys, I'll be honest, Kellen Moore is going to be one of the top head coaching candidates coming into this upcoming offseason. And I mean, with the offense that the Cowboys have had over the past couple of seasons, like deservedly so. But at the same time, his play calling, I am not a big fan of. Like, I am just, I need to see the Cowboys get more balance there, especially on early downs, man. Set themselves up in better situations, especially when it comes to third downs. Like I'm just not a big fan of his play calling overall. But aside from that, like them not being put in a great position by their own play calling, maybe some people will feel different from that. But overall, I mean, they just need their star players to play like star players, and I think they're kind of, if they don't, like, if you're talking about, we're talking about the Trayvon Diggs. We're talking about them relying on some like really young players, right? With Trayvon Diggs, Micah Parsons, right? They've got kind of Leighton Vander Esch in the middle there, and obviously Randy Gregory and D-Law coming off the edge there. But they're relying on some really young players to kind of step up in big situations here and grind out these victories for them. So yeah, maybe there's some bumps along the road, but this Cowboys team overall, I certainly agree with you. I have some reservations when it comes to them. I think that, is this a team that could win first round wildcard weekend? Yeah, but it's a team that also I would not be surprised in any way, shape, or form. Like, they haven't beat anyone significant enough, in my opinion, in a month and a half. Like, like it's just they have to get back. Week 18 against the Eagles next week is a massive week for the Cowboys, because if you're rolling into the, I've talked about it before, you got to be healthy and you've got to be hot entering the postseason, right? Like any sport. And the Cowboys, they are right now, if they go into the playoffs they're healthy, but they are on a 2-game skid, especially losing the Cardinals and then the Eagles, 2 playoff teams, that is big time. So Cowboys are right now, they're in a really tough spot. Do you have anything else on this game?
No, I mean, just kind of the other two, maybe just tidbits on the Cowboys, one for each team, I guess, is just from scrolling on Twitter. Kyler Murray is now like 9-0 or something in Dallas, which is pretty significant. And the other one was the yards that Trayvon Diggs has given up. And I kind of saw one tweet just briefly before I hopped on here. Just someone saying like his 11 interceptions have just masked one of the worst coverage years by a cornerback in NFL history. And just looking at some of the numbers that he's given up in one-on-one coverage, and it was like 30%. I don't know what percentage it was of the catches that are made when he's in coverage go for 10 or more yards. It was pretty incredible to look at. I haven't looked at the specific statistics like that, but just seeing that tweet, I don't know the relevance of it at this point, but I found that interesting right before. So
it is relevant though, because, and I'm glad you brought that up, because Trayvon Diggs, like I've been saying this, like I'm not going to go into the details of everything, but like he's coming into last year's draft. He is not a good man-to-man cover corner. He's not your, that's why everybody, when he was going off and he was like 8 interceptions early on in the season through like the first like 8 games, whatever it was, everybody's, oh, he's like Deion Sanders. Like, no, he's not. He's not Deion Sanders. Deion Sanders was a lockdown, man-to-man corner. I will shut you out of this game. Trayvon Diggs is very much a zone corner. Okay, like he would thrive in the Legion of Boom, for example. Which is, oh, by the way, guess who the defensive coordinator is from the Legion of Boom, who's now in Dallas? It's Dan Quinn. He is now, like he's brought that over. So he is thriving in this defensive system because of what he's asked to do. He's a great zone corner who can make plays on the ball, who has great ball skills. That is what he is. Putting him one-on-one to match up against somebody and lock down a top receiver, that's not his game yet. I'm not saying he can't become that, but that's just not his game right now. So yeah, a lot of his interceptions, kind of what you're talking about there, man, is just like a lot of his interceptions, they are, a lot of his big time plays are coming in zone coverage where he can just go make a play on the ball. But yeah, like he's allowed up a lot of yards. He has definitely not had the most he hasn't had an unblemished season. Let's put it that way. Let's wrap this episode up, Bryce, with one last thing. Let's go QB index real quick. I thought this was interesting because Dan Orlovsky, a guy that I've become a big fan of just specifically in this season, love what he's doing from a broadcasting standpoint. He released a QB index last week with Joe Burrow inside the top 5 of his quarterbacks right now. And he got a lot of flack, a lot of pushback for that. And Joe Burrow backed him up big time today, obviously. But give me your top 5 quarterbacks as it stands in the NFL right now, because I think we have a crop of, I'm going to say 8 quarterbacks that we're working with it. But I think everybody could probably argue with who's maybe, 3, 4, 5 in that group kind of thing. But give me your top 5 right now as it stands.
Yeah, this is when you told me about this discussion earlier, it was one you think about, but like you said, you have the handful of guys that come to your mind right away. I think that the top quarterback discussion is one that's really interesting because it's the most valuable position in all of sports, right? It's the NFL quarterback, and people rate these guys on different scales of, the guy that's going to go out and give you a chance to win every game, the guy that can steal you a game and make that, that 30-yard bomb down the field when you need a big play. And there's certain guys that, thrive off having great receivers and a great offensive line. And there's other guys who, are doing great things in not favorable positions. But I think when it comes down to it, my personal judgment of these guys is, if I'm playing a playoff game tomorrow, these are the top 5 guys that I'm most comfortable at the helm and given the keys to. So with that being said, I will give a shout out to 2 guys that I really wanted to put up here, but since it is, as of right now, as you mentioned, Joe Burrow, I would probably slot him in the 6th spot right now. Obviously, with that knee injury, I don't know. We obviously are going to need to see, but he's probably going to power through that like he has. And with the performance he had today, and how he's still able to find Jamar Chase, if we've seen what those two have done in college, and we're going to see it for the next decade. So on the outside looking in, I would have Joe Burrow and I would have Dak Prescott, who I really wanted to put in there, but after, a tough game today and a weaker schedule, I'm going to have to give number 5 to second-year quarterback Justin Herbert. A really solid year, a really good year last year, and he's kind of one of those guys that is, making a team who maybe a lot of people didn't have too much hope in. He's won and stole some games for that team. Number 4, I'd have Josh Allen. And this is going to be where the run in the AFC sort of comes to a stilt until I get to number 15. But Josh Allen, he can make any play. He's getting a lot more mobile with his legs, and I think he's benefited from a good defense in Buffalo this year. But I would like to have him at the helm this year, despite maybe taking a step back, and that's the reason why I don't have him higher on this list. The next 2 are flip a coin, and that's Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady for me. Okay. You really, like, the 2 best veterans, to have these 2 guys in the league at the same time, both trying to get, a signature moment late in their career, chasing completely different narratives at this point, and what they've both been able to do when they've been counted out, and it was a proven year for Aaron Rodgers, internally more than externally, but Tom Brady having one of the best years of his career is incredible, especially after winning another Super Bowl with his first year at Tampa Bay. It's incredible what he's been able
laughable.
To do. It is. But number 1, I have Patrick Mahomes, and I think that's who's going to be on a lot of people's lists. Obviously, he's playing with a tough defense, but they're running right with teams, and they're coming off a fresh win streak that obviously got snapped today. But the way that he's able to create plays that other guys are unable to is going to be more valuable to me than anything any other quarterback has at this point in the season. And if I need one game tomorrow, I'm probably going to lose to Tom Brady because I always seem to bet against him and always get that shoved down my throat. But I would be riding with Patrick Mahomes at this point.
Okay. That was quite the build up to your list. I love that. That was a lot of drama there. That was awesome. I think we have, and I respect that top five. I think we actually have the same top five except for one, our fifth guy. I flipped my guys. As it stands right now, I got Joe Burrow at 5, Justin Herbert at 6. But I don't even hate you having Justin Herbert at 5 there. That's a big toss up. Obviously, on the outside looking in, other guys are Dak Prescott, Matthew Stafford is in the conversation. I think some people would even, Lamar Jackson. I think some people are probably screaming maybe if they're still watching. I would be one of
those people if I had a biased MVP caliber season. I have to come on here and show some bias. I'm unable to, but yeah.
Right. Yes. Some people might say, hey, give some love to Lamar Jackson, throw him somewhere in the top 5 there as well. So maybe that's not another name, but my top 5 is going to go like this. I'm going to go 5 Burrow. I think Burrow is just already. He's just shown some ridiculous stuff already. Like he's kind of shut anybody out. Like the way I'll put it with Joe Burrow is like, if you had any questions, concerns about him coming out of college and if it was just a magical season, a splash in the pan kind of season with him in LSU, he has shut that completely out. He is here to stay. He's the real deal. He's here. Get used to it. Josh Allen, number 4. There is very few times where Josh Allen is on the field and he is not the best player on the football field. So Josh Allen at number 4, absolutely for me. I think that to your point, how you mentioned, he has kind of maybe taken a little bit of a step back this season. In my opinion, he's not. I was expecting him to be more in that MVP conversation. He is not. For that reason, I got to slot him back a little bit. I actually am going to go number 3, Patrick Mahomes, as it stands right now. So your number 1 guy is my number 3 guy. I think Patrick Mahomes, if I had done this maybe 5 weeks, 6 weeks, 7 weeks ago, Patrick Mahomes might not even be in my top 5, or maybe he'd be 5th on my list. But he has adjusted so nicely this year. He has turned into not just an explosive downfield gunslinging quarterback. He has progressed into a patient manager of the game now is what he is. And for that reason, the Kansas City Chiefs are now number 1 seed, and they have a chance to run it back for a 3rd time. So Patrick Mahomes, big props to Patrick Mahomes. To your point, though, a lot of these are just kind of a coin flip at this point, especially when you get to the top here. Tom Brady is going to be my number 2. I think Tom Brady, especially if we're going off your thing with he's going to be, if you're going to start a playoff game tomorrow, right, with Tom Brady, that's probably one of your top guys. And then, whatever, man. You want to call it bias? I don't care. Aaron Rodgers this is the MVP of the league right now. I don't think you can, you can't really dispute that, right? This is the MVP of the NFL. He's going to win his 4th MVP. Aaron Rodgers, man, he is making throws that are just some of these guys dream of making. Like Patrick Mahomes has the arm strength, Josh Allen has the arm strength, but the accuracy to do it with the arm strength that Aaron Rodgers has and the flick of the wrist that he shows. You want to talk about the arm talent? You want to talk about the mental side of things? You want to talk about whatever, man. Aaron Rodgers has it. He has it all. He's still playing at such a high level. Not even going to talk about what the future holds. Whatever. We'll see where everything goes. But as it stands right now, man, Aaron Rodgers is the top quarterback in the NFL for me. And honestly, it's not really like it's close, but it's like I didn't have trouble writing that name down at the top. It wasn't even really a second thought for me. But yeah, that's where I stand right now. Quick thoughts?
Well, it's not a surprise. I'm sure to anyone watching this, it's not a surprise. I think it was interesting how we flip-flopped 1 and 3, but we both kind of had Tom Brady as that number 2, and I'm sure that, it's very possible that Rodgers and Mahomes both get shoved by Brady come suit playoff time, really, for both of those guys. But it's going to be interesting, and especially when you look at our list with, me having Herbert, you having Burrow, the fact that both of the top 5 quarterbacks are playoff quarterbacks, right? And
silly, yeah.
How reliant it is and how important that is, right? When you look at people criticizing the Hall of Fame for being, the Hall of Quarterbacks or something like that, it's that important when it comes down to it. These are the top teams, and they need to have a top guy to get that wagon moving. And that's how this league operates. That's how it's always going to operate. So,
yeah, Yeah, absolutely, man. Yeah, that's and especially just like to your point, like on that note, like Joe Burrow and Justin Herbert. I mean, both in their second year. This is just is absolutely incredible. Like the fact that we are even have this conversation that they are even in the top 5, that we're debating whether they are 5th or 6th best at their position in the NFL. Like that's absolutely ridiculous. Bryce, man, thank you very much for coming on the show again, man. This has been really awesome. We're gonna definitely have you back next season. We're gonna maybe see if we can do some stuff during the playoffs. We'll see. But this was meant to be a regular season show. But we're gonna be back again for the final episode next week of the regular season. We're going out with a bang. We're bringing in Arash Madani from Sportsnet, man, Minnesota Viking fan. We're also gonna have Taylor Allen back here as the guest co-host, man, who is also a Minnesota Vikings fan. So there's gonna be some fireworks. We've been talking about the Minnesota Vikings a lot on this show this season, but man, we're going out with a bang. I can promise you that. Bryce, thanks very much. Get some sleep, man, and enjoy the rest of the NFL season.
Thanks for having me, man.
Thanks very much for tuning in to the Final Drive. We'll see you guys next week.